we're hoping that we're going to get to share practical strategies that you can use in the week before the Super Bowl and in the week after the Super Bowl, and make that a routine and consistent part of your practice. Because of course you don't get a media literacy muscle with just one repetition. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You have to exercise that muscle for it to get stronger. But I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to Frank Baker, who's my partner in crime for this series. Our series on media literacy is going to be a year-long program, right, Frank? Frank, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why we should study advertising in the context of K-12 education?
Well, you know, Renee, one of the things that I really like to do is look at the popular culture and what's in the news and make the media literacy connection for teachers and students. You and I both know that the Super Bowl game and the Super Bowl ads are all the buzz in the weeks before the game, and they are hoping that people will begin, talking and tweeting and get curious. A lot of these companies have teaser ads, and if you're paying attention, advertising is such a huge topic. It plays such a huge role in our lives and the lives of our students. This is one of the last appointment television events. We all stop what we're doing to be in front of the television on that Sunday afternoon at 6:40 when kickoff begins, and we anticipate those breaks in the action to see those ads because we want to talk about them. It's the water cooler conversation the next day, except we don't have to even wait till the next day. And so, as you know, Renee, for 16 years, I have hosted a web page called Using Super Bowl Ads in the Classroom. Now, if you're new to Frank Baker and you don't know about the Media Literacy Clearinghouse, shame on you. You can Google Using Super Bowl Ads in the Classroom and find all kinds of resources, which we will talk about today. But when Renee and I were planning this, I said, Renee, I sure hope we can show some commercials. And Renee said, of course, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to try to demonstrate what we know that we want you and your students to know so that they can better appreciate advertising, because it's a big deal. Who on the webinar has $5 million sitting around not being used that you would like to spend on a commercial to reach over 100 million people? Raise your hand if you have $5 million, because I know I don't, but this is the big deal.
Nice. Thank you so much. I feel thrilled, given your expertise on this topic, Frank, I feel thrilled to be joining you for this. We've decided to move this fast-paced 1-hour program into just 5 topics. We've started already with why study advertising. We're going to talk about how to support close reading. We're going to talk about what about emotion and identity. The big question, who benefits from advertising? That'll be a small group activity. And then we'll end with a deeper reflection on the purpose of advertising. If you go to the chat right now, you'll see that I've placed the slides for this session in the chat room, and you are invited to open that up. You can make a copy of that for yourself and use the videos and the resources that are part of this session with your own students. And of course, we hope you modify them and improve them and make them better. But we might as well start with this little slide here because, oops, hold on here. Done. Present, that's what I want to do. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it as a big screen there, right? You know how much at the Media Education Lab we like to start with a emotional check-in. These emotions are some of the emotions that advertisers want to use to connect products to feelings. So, speaking personally, why don't you annotate or circle or just call out an emotion that really works for you when you're trying to when you're being influenced. For me, of course, I notice I'm very susceptible to advertising that activates grief. Whew. I'm a sucker for advertising that activates grief. It's hard for me to not be influenced by that. Which of these emotions are you susceptible to influence?
Fear.
Say more, Frank. Say more.
Every time that burglary company commercial comes on and that guy breaks down the door and the operator says, you know, you need to be protected, you know, call this phone number. Gosh, nobody wants their home broken into or their car broken into. Fear is so powerful. We just come out of the political ad season when fear is used a lot, right?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Who else wants to comment? Which of these emotions are you susceptible to when it comes to being influenced by advertising?
Sadness.
Say more about that, Jane.
Those advertisements with the dogs and the sad music and the eyes and the dogs that are allegedly locked up. It's just, you can't not react. You just feel like almost crying, depending on if you were just watching some movie in between. You know, they're very manipulative, the music plus the dog eyes.
Yeah.
Jane, I was just eating lunch and one of those ASPCA commercials came on and I actually changed the channel because I couldn't handle it.
I changed the channel.
Oh, because you got teary, right?
Yeah.
Hey, who identified nostalgia as a really easy emotion to activate? I'd love to hear more about what you notice about that. That's powerful.
The ads that I most gravitate towards that are nostalgic are the Subaru ads. Especially the ones with the dogs, which you don't see very often. I don't know if that's nostalgia, but it evokes just a warm kind of nostalgic feeling.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. Of course, we think it's really important for us to own our own susceptibility to advertising as a way to start with this topic, right? Because it's not like we're pointing fingers at how other people are influenced. We're acknowledging we are influenced by advertising, and we don't believe that media literacy will stop you from being influenced by advertising, right? It's not an antidote, but it is a powerful muscle that can help you see ads in a new way. Why bring Super Bowl ads into the classroom? As we watch this ad, we'd like you to put your answer in the chat. Let's watch this ad and you take some time and put your answer in the chat. Why bring Super Bowl ads into the classroom?
Yeah, just your typical Super Bowl car ad, right? Or a hilarious beer ad. Or whatever ad this is. Whatever. But it's a Tide ad. What? It's a Tide ad. What makes it a Tide ad? There are no stains. Look at those clean clothes. What else would this be an ad for? Diamonds? A gift that lasts for a time. It's time for a cold refreshment. Tide ad.
Fall into the sleep of your
Tide ad. Extreme. No, Tide. Tide!
Meet the all-new. No, it's a Tide ad. Tide.
Okay. Let's take a look at what you put up in the chat room. Why study advertising?
I'm looking for, it's fun. You know, you bring a commercial into the classroom and ask students to comment on it. Wow. You know, kind of breaking the mold. We don't have to open the textbook. Oh my God. Let's look at some ads.
Fair enough, Frank. I see some comments in the chat room around engagement. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else want to offer a reason why study Super Bowl advertising?
So for me, hi, Cindy. I love using these for target audience to get at, particularly the Super Bowl used to be so targeted to men and only started to get into cleaners fairly recently, but this is clearly still targeted to men for laundry detergent. So that's just unusual. And to explore that and the techniques that they're using to target to men, I think is really cool.
Thank you for sharing. Of course, many of you have written in the chat about the idea of relevance. The Super Bowl lets us connect the classroom to the culture in a really specific and authentic way. We thought the first and most fundamental practice of media literacy that we wanted to take time to model today was the practice of close analysis. And so, Frank, you've picked a really cool ad for us to analyze. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and will you talk us through this this plan that you have?
Yeah, now before you play it, Renee, you know, in a lot of my work, I'll ask teachers how many of you all have experience in close reading, and they all raise their hands, but that's close reading of print. And then I'll ask how many of you have experienced close reading media text, and no hands come up. So it's really clear a lot of educators aren't getting the necessary training in how to engage students in what I call, you know, these media text. And of course, these are the things that they are involved in. And so when we are close reading a commercial, we want them to be aware of all of the elements that go into making it. So we're talking about deconstruction. How did they make this? Who was involved? Since advertising is still primarily male dominated, does that mean that all the commercials are made by men? You know, when we ask the critical media literacy question, who created the message? We don't know, for the most part, who makes these commercials. We know who the sponsor is or who the product is, but unless we dive deep into an advertising article, we may never know the name of the company that created them and the motivation behind it. So I've created a couple of handouts. We'll look at those in just a minute, but Renee's going to play this piece, and I found this one from last year. So think about, I won't give you any advice. We'll ask you to just make some general comments, because we might play it twice. So you will get your general impressions after we play it one time.
What's that?
Reese's Take 5 bar. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, peanut butter, pretzels.
Never heard of it.
Where have you been? Under a rock? New to me. What, were you born yesterday? Raised by wolves? Are you clueless? Head in the sand?
That's offensive, Trish.
Yeah, Trish.
You from another planet?
Oh, Trish, none of us have heard of Take 5, so who looks stupid now?
Reese's Take 5, the best bar you've never heard of.
So when I first saw this ad,
What's that?
all I could think about was the ad people sitting around a table, you know, trying to come up with that. Obviously, they used the Super Bowl to introduce this product. Okay, so this is a brand new product that's being introduced. And let me get everybody's just general reactions. You know, use the chat, tell us what you think. I'm not looking for media literacy answers, just your general reaction to this one. Did you find yourself laughing, smirking? Yeah, somebody said hate it, strange. Visuals reinforce the message, absolutely. Representation, yeah, funny. All right, so I'm very much interested in media from the perspective of the English language arts, right? So why not use this ad as an example to ask students to try to identify the idioms, right? what's the setting? So when we look at a commercial, I'm an advocate for playing it more than once because there are so many elements in commercials, right? Even a political campaign commercial. It goes by so quickly that it's really important to play it more than once. And that's a strategy I've used for a long time. Looking at the visuals, what did you see? What did you notice? What were the sounds? Is any symbols? The techniques of persuasion, which unfortunately have fallen off the radar of many states' standards because of Common Core. Was there a particular slogan that they wanted you to remember? What was left out? Is this commercial, this particular one, do you find it offensive in any way, right? Because some of them can be. So I have created a Super Bowl ad analysis worksheet. I did this a long time ago, and I just want to briefly take you through it. You're welcome to download it from my website. And so the specific columns say to identify the product. Again, we want students to be specific. Who is in this ad? And in the target audience, who is it most likely to appeal to? We're talking about kids, teens, older adults, gender, men, women, both. How do you know? The visuals, what stands out in a particular ad? What do you remember? The sounds, including music, did you hear that make it memorable? What message is the ad or the product sending to the audience? Was there a memorable slogan? Did the ad encourage you to do something like go to social media, include a hashtag, keep the conversation going? And did you do that? Okay. What arguments or techniques of persuasion are being utilized in these ads? Were they effective? And my last column asks students to just think about voting. Which ad would you say was the best? And of course, that's going to be a rich conversation with your students.
Nice. So Frank, what say you? We engage this group in watching it again. He's fertilized you with a bunch of questions. We'll watch it one more time, and then we'll break up into some small groups and have you guys talk through what you want to say about this ad. Give me a thumbs up if you understand the task that we're going to do now. Okay, here we go. We're going to watch it again, then we're going to break up into small groups. We're going to talk for about 5 or 7 minutes about this ad. And then we're going to come back and reflect.
What's that?
Reese's Take 5 bar. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, peanut butter, pretzels.
Never heard of it.
Where have you been? Under a rock?
New to me.
What were you, born yesterday? Raised by wolves? Are you clueless? Head in the sand?
That's offensive, Trish.
Yeah, Trish.
You from another planet?
Oh, Trish, none of us have heard of Take 5, so who looks stupid now?
Reese's Take 5, the best bar you've never heard of.
Okay, here we go. Small groups are the way to make a new friend and to engage in the kind of networking that we really appreciate. I'm going to assign breakout rooms so that there'll be just 5 or 6 people in each group. Okay, we only have, where's Frank? Frank, where are you, buddy?
I'm here, Renee. Can you not find me?
I see you.
I want everybody to see me right now because Renee and I, Terry Bradshaw gave away like $1 million during some of the NFL games. Renee and I have pulled our money together. We're going to give away a trip to Hawaii at the end. Aren't we, Renee? Wait a minute. We're not going to give away a trip to Hawaii. All right. Well, stay tuned because we've got some surprises coming up.
We do indeed. So let's just hear from 3 or 4 people, Frank. What do you say? Some big insight that came out of your small group meeting that you want to share with us. Who's first? Don't be shy.
I'll go.
Thanks.
We decided that the commercial kind of fell flat because none of us were interested in getting that candy bar.
So you guys are just not the target audience for a candy bar like
For that candy bar.
Yeah, for that candy bar. Okay, fair enough. Thanks for sharing. Who's next? What was some insight that came out of your group?
My group, target audience wise, is related. Our group had a person from New Zealand and a person from Korea, was in like Finland. And we did talk about how foreigners wouldn't necessarily get the sayings. But on the other side of that, we talked about how interesting it was that idioms that are known were being represented visually, that we, isn't something that one has ever thought of. But we all agreed, or many of us agreed, that the final visual, the final idiom, which I didn't understand what it was, I thought it was Humpty Dumpty, was offensive because to at least a couple of us, it looked like it could be mistaken, the creature could be mistaken for a little person.
So head up your ass.
Yeah, I didn't.
Head up your ass was offensive and could be misinterpreted. Great point, Jane. Frank,
Well, not me. It was my group.
Yeah,
Collective.
excellent summary of the group. Joyce, you're next. What big insights came out of your group conversation?
Well, it felt like nobody wanted that candy bar, and there was a negative response to the snarkiness of the woman. There's also this whole notion that our candy bar script has been limited to classic candy bars, and the introduction of a new product into the market might be something strange. And so this whole notion of fear of missing out is applied to a candy bar when it's usually applied to something like sneakers or something like that. But what's odd about it is everybody in that commercial, it doesn't seem like a sneaker type buying person. So there's 30s and 40s people who you wouldn't think would naturally have this fear of missing out relating to whether or not they were cool enough and had the right candy bar. And then the other thing is, like, there's something going on that's gender thing. There's this whole notion of, like, these feel like dad jokes to me. And they're coming out of a woman's mouth, and they seem like really odd. And the dad, there is a woman who is one of the tired slogan things, but it felt like mostly men were the butt of these dad joke things. And I don't think we figured, I don't know about insights, Renee, but these are things we were talking about.
Wow, absolutely great. Thank you for sharing. Heather, I'm going to call on you next. What was a big idea that came up in our group?
So one of the things we talked about was almost like it was trying to avoid offending people, and how, like, right now there's a big fear of offending people and being offensive. So it, like, calls to these different groups, and they're like, no, don't say that one's offensive.
Yeah, so we thought maybe it's speaking in a larger way about some resentments that people have about, being politically correct. Let's hear from two more people before we move on. What came out of what points came up in your conversation that you'd like to share?
Well, our group had,
Stephen.
Our group had similar comments, but we also talked about how even watching it twice, there were elements of the commercial that we missed. So it kind of had that perspective conversation and the attention that has to be placed on really viewing it to make sure, if I missed this, what did someone else miss? Or what did someone else pick up on that I did not pick up on?
Thanks for sharing.
And I'll just say, in our group, we had teachers of different, teaching at different grade levels. So we talked a lot about, would you use this in your class if you were teaching fourth graders or middle schoolers? Particularly with respect to that last image, would it be appropriate or not, and so forth.
Nice. So Frank, I'm going to give you the last word, but we are going to watch it again.
Okay, right? So Renee, what I did was copy the transcript from YouTube. I don't know how many educators think about doing a copy and paste of the transcript and actually creating the script so that you could follow along as you watch. And many of you all in our group, they didn't even understand what the character said at the very last scene. And as I recall, and we'll watch it again, he's saying something like, Trish, none of us know about this candy bar ad, this candy bar. Sorry, we're just as clueless. But anyway, yeah, let's
Yeah,
watch it.
he doesn't say head up your ass, but you, the viewer, are expected to fill in that idiom. All right, last time's a charm. Think about how your interpretation has changed because of our discussion experience.
What's that?
Reese's Take 5 bar. Chocolate, peanuts, caramel, peanut butter, pretzels.
Never heard of it.
Where have you been? Under a rock?
New to me.
What were you, born yesterday? Raised by wolves? Are you clueless? Head in the sand?
That's offensive, Trish. Yeah, Trish.
You from another planet?
Oh, Trish, none of us have heard of Take 5, so who looks stupid now?
Reese's Take 5, the best bar you've never heard of.
Wow. Frank, last word before we move on.
Well, I just want to say, and I've preached this all the time, all media involve writing. Okay, who would be opposed to teaching students that this commercial was first written, right? So think about that as one of your approaches. Media are text. They involve writing, everything from photography to film to commercials. And so if you haven't thought about that, I'm here to say, think about it. And you can certainly dive in. I actually found an article from the vice president of the product. It said, we are decided to use the Super Bowl as the venue to introduce this candy bar. So now I'm interested in knowing what happened to the sales of this product after the ad ran. Also, was there a coupon in the Sunday paper during that weekend of the Super Bowl? Right? Was this part of a larger branded campaign? Because I really doubt it was just a one commercial and then we never hear about that candy bar again. So I think the opportunities for students to really dive in and explore more.
Great point. Now, Frank, you said there's something new happening with this year's Super Bowl that might be especially relevant and interesting to middle school students and to high school students. Let's take a look at that. What's going on with that, Frank?
So if you didn't already know it, the NFL partnered for the first time to air a game on Nickelodeon. And if you didn't see it, they had special hosts that I think young people would know and recognize and appeal to. And I watched the entire game specifically for the commercials. And I switched back and forth between Nick and CBS because Nickelodeon and CBS are both part of Viacom. And I thought there would be more commercials aimed at the younger set. There were not. But surprisingly, I saw commercials for Garnier and for other product, Neutrogena, that were aimed at women. And the only commercials that I saw for young people were the Nick promos. But then again, there were ads for the NFL shop, encouraging parents maybe to buy products for the younger set. But it's obvious that the NFL is trying to expand on their brand, to bring in different audiences, and this was their opportunity. For me, again, I'd be interested in seeing what the ratings for that particular broadcast were. If you're familiar with Green Slime, who isn't, it was a big part of the opening of the show. During the show itself, when touchdowns were scored, there was slime everywhere. And I didn't make it to the end of the game, but I was told they were going to slime the winning coach. So I didn't see that, but I'll have to follow up on that one.
Wow. So explicit marketing to children is a part of this new sort of business model for the NFL. That is fascinating and certainly could make the subject of a great inquiry, right? Where students could learn as much as they could about that. We recognize that although we modeled an activity that involved close reading, we share this slide with you to remind ourselves that when we ask media literacy questions, we also sometimes explore the contexts and the realities, not only just the messages and the meanings, right? So thinking about that larger context is a really important phenomenon. Now, it's useful to dig down into issues of tone, mood, and humor, and to think about how ads activate emotion, how they rely on character and credibility, and how they have to be aligned with the specific timing, situation, and context. Let's look at last year's Super Bowl ad for an example.
Hey Google, show me photos of me and Loretta. Remember, Loretta hated my mustache. Remember, Loretta loved going to Alaska and scallops. Show me photos from our anniversary. Remember, she always snorted when she laughed. Play our favorite movie. Remember, I'm the luckiest man in the world. Come on, boy.
Frank, I've seen that ad 10 times. It gets me every time.
You're not the only one.
So what do you think? Should we use ads that activate strong emotions in a classroom? Why or why not? Put your answer in the chat. Should we use ads that activate strong emotion in the classroom? Why or why not?
Like invoke strong emotion with students is like a great learning experience because you can talk about, well, why, like the emotional response, I think helps students learn when they're not necessarily understanding like the why of it all, if that makes sense.
That was beautifully put. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I think emotion is so commonly used in advertising. We think about McDonald's, I'm loving it, you know, and in our little group a moment ago, we were talking about the Budweiser campaign where they have a little dog being lost and found by horses, and nowhere in there does it say, you know, anything about Budweiser beer. Emotion is such a commonly used technique.
Thanks for sharing. Helen, I saw you had your hand up. What should we teach about? Should we bring a strong, emotionally resonant ad like this into the classroom? Why or why not?
I think it really depends on the quality of your relationship with your students. I think that if you don't understand your students and don't have a relationship with them, it could be very triggering. It could also become counterproductive. But I think if you've got that really deep bond to understand where students are coming from, so I wouldn't use an ad like that in the first week of class. But I would use it partway through once you've established those very important rapports.
Thanks for sharing. Very insightful. I see lots of hands up. Jennifer, you're next.
I used that ad in my class last year.
Tell us about it.
Well, so as an aside, I guess the Super Bowl was that happened about 3 weeks after my husband had a heart attack and open heart surgery, and I had actually watched him be revived. And so it was actually very emotional for me. And before we ever watched it, I told them, I said, this is it's a hard ad to watch. I said, I cried, and I will probably cry while we're watching it. And it was a class of all boys, of all high school boys. So, you know, I think that, you know, we talked about it. They were very reverent. They were a bunch of boys who tend to posture. So I thought it was good for discussion as to how commercials can tug at emotions like that.
Yeah, and you also got a chance to model being an authentic person, and that's beautiful as well. Thank you so much for the great comments that are developing in the chat. You could see that we could talk about that for a lot longer, but we have to press on because our time is limited. We did want to call your attention to the fact that there's a fairly robust dialogue going on about the unrealities of that ad, right? And this is one I really thought was pretty good. On a blog post, the sinister realities of Google's tear-jerking Super Bowl commercial, this article points out how dangerous it is to create a fantasy of outsourcing memories technologically, and just how inhumane it is to put the technology at the center of the most important things about our human relationships. We thought this ad would be an interesting one to play the then and now game. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever played the then and now game. Okay, so here's how it works. The then and now game works like this. We're going to watch an ad that aired 1 year ago. We're going to think about how does this ad address the Super Bowl audience at that particular moment in time. But at the same time, we're going to think about how is this ad understood today at this particular moment in time. We're trying to make the point that meanings are in people, not in things, and that kairos, that's the ancient Greek term for the idea of communication being profoundly situational at a moment in time, and the meaning comes from its place in time, right? We think that's a really important thing. Be thinking about those two questions as we play then and now. How did the ad address the Super Bowl audience then? And how might we understand it today now?
They call us typical Americans. Maybe because we live typical American lives. Like this typical American, showing off his strength. So typical. Look at him, touching other people's things. Always so competitive. Typical Americans, showing up uninvited. Removing their clothes in public. Yelling and being loud. Just look at them, thinking they can save the world. Typical Americans, always celebrating with their typical American beer. So next time someone labels you typical, show them what typical can do.
So you can see the power of an activity that might involve us thinking a little bit about probably why it's so complicated for the advertisers to be creating Super Bowl ads now. 5 days after the attack on democracy, the siege of the Capitol, what does advertising do in relation to this uniquely tender moment that we have right now? And how difficult it's going to be to address that specifically. But now, Frank, we only have 10 minutes, and we thought we would model this activity about who benefits from advertising instead of making it a breakout group room. Why don't we just do this as a group of the whole? Frank, you go first, and I'll start with annotations, and then I'll invite anyone else who wants to also make annotations. The activity goes like this. Use the chart to depict all the different ways that money flows for Super Bowl advertising. So we're going to draw lines that show how the money flows. It's $400 million. How does it flow? Frank, you first.
Well, Renee, I really love the question for young people. Who benefits?
Frank, we only have 10 minutes, and we thought we would model this activity about who benefits from advertising instead of making it a breakout group room, why don't we just do this as a group of the whole? Frank, you go first, and I'll start with annotations, and then I'll invite anyone else who wants to also make annotations. The activity goes like this. Use the chart to depict all the different ways that money flows for Super Bowl advertising. So we're going to draw lines that show how the money flows. It's $400 million. How does it flow? Frank, you first.
Well, Renee, I really love the question for young people. Who benefits? You know, you go to the grocery store, you buy a magazine. Who benefits from your purchase? So here we have the Super Bowl, where commercials are now being sold for $5.6 million. And I want students to think, you know, beyond the 5.6 million. I want them to think beyond the 114 million who watched the game when it had a record audience a few years back. I want them to think about the relationships. Okay, so how does an advertiser get that spot in this broadcast? Okay, so if I'm the candy bar company and I've got an idea, how do I get it on the air? What are the steps? You know, advertising agency. We never put kids on a bus and say, hey, we're kids, we're going to go on a field trip today to the ad agency. No, we don't do that. We don't teach them what happens in an advertising agency, but these are really interesting kinds of connections, right? And they are probably thinking about careers, maybe in the media. So this is designed to help you and they make the connection, because Super Bowl economics is absolutely huge. Somebody is making money. When we think about benefit, it's about primarily who benefits from a 30-second ad in this game.
Yeah, so the Reese's company paid an advertising agency a fair amount of dollars to produce that ad. And the advertising agency, they paid the director, the lighting guy, the gaffer, the makeup crew to actually film it, right? But what other relationships, economic relationships, do we want to call attention to here? You shout out the explanation and I'll annotate it on the screen. Who's next?
So for me, I think always, what is it that gets sold that provides the money is kind of the key. And that what gets sold is us. It's not time. They're not buying time. They are buying us by the head. And it is the eyeballs on the screen. And that's why it's so important for rating companies, Nielsen's and others, to document who's watching. So we get sold by the head.
Nice. And thank you so much for also noting another important institution that's not on my chart, Cindy. I don't have the Nielsen ratings here, but if Reese's is going to give $5 million to, what network is it this year? Viacom?
CBS.
CBS, yep. Then they want to prove from a money's worth point of view that they got what they paid for. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. What other economic relationships do we want to call out here?
Well, the players are, I think I mean, to me, I just can't disassociate American football from bread and circuses and gladiators, and the players are products, and I think it's a really sad and horrible thing about professional sports anywhere. And I think if there's a way of at least making young people aware of it, it's important. They're factory workers, but with very few rights.
Yeah.
At least they're getting
is being sold.
At least they're getting paid at the professional level. I'm a big college sports fan. In fact, my team plays tonight. Ohio State plays Alabama for the college championship. Wow. And those guys aren't getting anything. So I mean, they're the true commodities, I think, is college sports.
Great
I think
point.
too, a more subtle connection might be between the advertising agency and the product consumer. As you played that commercial, Renee and Frank, the first thing that went through my mind was, is this pitched more towards the Trumpites or, you know, the progressives or whatever? So it seemed that the advertising agency has to be way careful because they could turn off this whole segment.
Such a great observation, because after all, where does Reese's Pieces get its money from? Well, it's me. When I buy anything produced by the Mars Candy Company.
Yeah.
So they better be careful that way.
And our graphic has left some entity medium completely out. Did you all recognize who is not represented in this graphic, which is, you know, the quintessential media literacy question? What's left out and why? Renee, were we showing any bias by leaving out the internet, the social media companies, the bloggers who are going to be blogging about these ads ad infinitum, because they also want, as Cindy Scheib has said, they also want the eyeballs on their websites, and right, so they benefit as well.
That is such a great point, Frank. And I love the idea of, after you play around with a chart like this, so we can start to see about, we can talk about the financial relationships, then wouldn't it be cool to have kids make their own chart? Because they'll put up influence marketers, right? They'll put on Twitterers who share memes, and there are economic relationships embedded in the social media landscape around the Super Bowl as well. All right, we're getting to the very end of our story, Frank, and we said we thought that the last activity that we would do really wasn't an activity, but was kind of a dialogue, a return to this question: what is the purpose of advertising? Frank, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I love to pose this question to students. You know, what's the purpose of advertising? And you know, 100% of them, I've been doing it for 20 years, they say, the purpose of advertising is to sell products. And I disagree. Here's my argument. See if I'm persuasive. The purpose of advertising is not to sell, it's to persuade. And if you agree with me, then perhaps we need to be teaching more of those propaganda, hint, Renee, propaganda techniques that we don't find in the teaching standards. And so I'm fond of saying, you've heard me say it before, Renee, what we aren't teaching students today is probably more important than what we are. And so I know those of you who are on the webinar probably do teach the techniques of persuasion and propaganda. And bravo and kudos to you, but I have a feeling many of you are in the minority. We need more educators to recognize those techniques of persuasion, because they've been used forever. They're continue to be used. And I think we need to hammer home that point, whether it's a Super Bowl ad, a political ad, a presidential candidate, or a car commercial.
Such a great point. If you think about it, persuasion works by building tight connections between ideas and feelings, or products and feelings. And ads do a really good job of linking products to feelings, and then even more closely to identities, personal and social identities. In a consumer culture, that link between products and feelings and identities is something that needs to be studied in order for us to thrive in this complicated world. Now, I want to give a big shout out to anybody who put a comment or made a comment in the chat. Will you wave to us so we can applaud you? Anybody who put something in the chat, give us a shout out, show us who you are, because you can download that chat. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in that chat. Frank, thank you so much for joining me. We do have a small announcement about our next event. I know you thought, oh, this was so much fun. Don't you want to do it again? And the answer is yes, you do. Next month, we'll be back on Wednesday, February 10th at 4 o'clock for a session called Reading the Pictures. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the photojournalism that's come out of the insurrection, the Capitol siege, the assault on democracy, or whatever you want to call it. And we're having a special guest. What's his name, Frank?
Michael Shaw. And Michael Shaw runs a wonderful website that you all need to know about called Reading the Pictures.
And Janae, the answer is yes, you can invite students. And thanks for joining us today. We are really happy that you participated. Your active participation means everybody who showed up learned from you. So thanks again, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.